What if you could build an incredible wooden ship model without spending hundreds of dollars on an expensive kit? In today's video, I'm going to scratch build this cargo ship model completely from a free ship plan. No fancy kit, no pre-cut parts, just raw materials, simple tools, and the plan itself. Alright, let's get started. Now you may be wondering, where did I even get this ship plan from? I actually downloaded it for free from freeshipplans.com. The site has hundreds of free ship drawings covering everything from cargo ships to warships and fishing boats. For this project, I chose this small 250-ton coaster cabotage ship. Since this is my very first scratch build, I wanted to start with something relatively simple and manageable before jumping into a massive or highly detailed vessel. And honestly, this project became a learning experience for me almost immediately. Right away, I noticed something odd with the plans. The profile drawing was scaled at 1 to 200, but the lines plan did actually match the same scale. At first, I thought I printed incorrectly, but after double checking, the plans themselves were slightly off. Thankfully, it's an easy fix. I simply resized and shrank the lines plan until it matched the profile correctly. It took a few test prints and some trial and error with the printer settings, but eventually everything lined up perfectly. Once the plans were properly scaled, it was finally time to start building the hull. I decided to use the classic bread and butter construction method. This is a really efficient traditional technique where the hull is built from multiple layers of wood stacked together, almost like laminating slices of bread. Each wooden layer follows a water lines from the ship plans, and once everything is glued together, the entire block is carved and shaped into the final hull form. It's actually a very satisfying process because you can watch the ship slowly emerge layer by layer. One thing you do need to pay close attention to here is the break line shown on lines plan, because that reference is critical for keeping the hull shape accurate as you build upward. While we continue shaping the hull, let's talk a little about the real ship behind this model. This small 250-ton Dutch coaster may not look particularly impressive compared to today's giant cargo ships, but vessels like this were once the true workhorse of European coastal trade. Known as the Beurtvaarder, or more commonly the Dutch motor coaster, these ships formed the backbone of regional shipping throughout much of the 20th century. The design originated in the northern Netherlands, especially around the Groningen region, where small canal-side shipyards became famous for building practical steel cargo vessels. Shipbuilders like Bordeaux, Wagenborg, and the Canoe Ship Collective gradually refined what became known as the classic Groningen Coaster. What made this ship so successful was their incredibly smart design. They had a shallow draft, allowing them to travel deep inland through rivers and canals. Yet, they were still sturdy enough to safely cross rough waters like the Northern Sea and the English Channel. In many ways, these ships were designed to do a little bit of everything. And honestly, these little coasters were fascinating ships. One of their most interesting features was the low air draft. Many were equipped with folding masts and compact wheelhouses, so they could pass underneath bridges that would completely stop larger vessels. They were designed to move seamlessly between canals, rivers, coastal waters, and open sea routes, basically doing jobs that larger cargo ships simply couldn't do. Alright, back to the actual build for a bit. After getting the solid hull fully carved, sanded, and smoothed out, I moved on to building the bulwarks. For this part, I used some leftover 0.5mm planking strips from previous builds. Honestly, that's one of the things I really enjoyed about scratch building. You start looking at the leftover materials completely differently. Nothing goes to waste. To create a cleaner and more realistic finish, I decided to plank the entire hull instead of leaving the carved wood exposed. Even though the hull underneath is already solid, adding the actual layer of planking really helps to unify the surface and gives the ship a much more convincing appearance once paint goes on later. Next came the portholes, and this was definitely one of those experimental engineering moments. I used a thin tin foil and made the porthole rims using two different hole punchers, a larger punch for the outer ring and the smaller one for the center opening. Surprisingly, the method worked reasonably well, although definitely not perfectly. At this tiny scale, even the smallest imperfections become painfully obvious. I will probably try a different method on future builds, so if any of you have good techniques for making miniature portholes, definitely let me know in the comments. After that, I added the rod rail using a thin piece of wire, which really helped to define the hull lines and instantly give the ship more personality. And finally, after hours of carving, sanding, planking, and fixing mistakes, the hull was starting to look less like a random block of wood and more like an actual Dutch coaster. At this point, I think she was finally ready for paint. They were also incredibly economical to operate because many of them were family owned and family run. In some cases, the captain, his wife, and even children all lived on board full time. The ship wasn't just their job, it was literally their home. And honestly, as a ship model builder who had never really lived on a working ship, other than cruise ships, I find that part incredibly fascinating. What was daily life actually like on board one of these small cargo vessels? How did families buy groceries while constantly traveling between ports? What did the kids do for entertainment long before the internet, YouTube, smartphones, or even television became common? There was no Amazon deliveries waiting at the next dock, no Wi-Fi, no streaming. Life must have felt both incredibly simple and incredibly difficult at the same time. If any of you have experience living or working on ships like this, definitely share your stories in the comments because I would genuinely love to hear them. Despite their relatively small size, these Dutch coasters were remarkably versatile vessels. They carried grain, timber, coal, machinery, bricks, almost anything that needed to move between the small ports of Northern Europe. In many ways, they were basically the delivery trucks of the sea. Another reason these ships became legendary was their durability. Dutch shipbuilders were known for building extremely robust steel hulls, and many of these coasters remained in service for 50 or even 60 years. A surprising number still survive today, although most have since been converted into houseboats, museum ships, or pirate yachts. At their peak between the 1920s and early 1960s, hundreds of these family coasters were built across dozens of Dutch shipyards. They dominated trade routes across the North Sea, the Baltic Sea, and the English Channel, constantly moving cargo between small ports in the Netherlands, Germany, and the eastern coast of the United Kingdom. But like many classic working ships, their decline came with modernization. As global shipping shifted towards massive container vessels, a 250-ton coaster simply could no longer compete economically. New international safety regulations also made it increasingly difficult for small family-owned ships to survive commercially. And once container shipping became the global standard, these older coasters, designed for loose, breakbulk cargo, quickly became obsolete. Now for the railings, ladders, and lifeboat. I have to admit something. I cheated a little bit. I used off-the-market photo-etched parts and some 3D printed details for those sections. I will drop links in the description below if you're interested. Honestly, scratch building everything from absolute zero would probably take me another 6 months. Even though these coasters have disappeared from commercial service, their legacy still lives on. Modern short sea cargo ships continue borrowing ideas from this efficient Dutch designs, and the naval historians still study their beautifully practical hull forms today. And honestly, that's one of the reasons I chose this vessel for my very first scratch build. It may be a small ship, but behind it is a surprisingly rich piece of maritime history. Now, for sure, this is not my best build. She is definitely not perfect. And I know I still have a very long way to go when it comes to scratch building. But everyone has to start somewhere, right? And honestly, that's part of the fun. If I can build this from a free ship plan and a pile of leftover materials, I'm pretty sure you can build something even better. So, if you have been thinking about starting your very first wooden ship model, but don't want to spend hundreds of dollars on expensive kits, maybe give scratch building a try. And when you do, definitely share your builds with us in the comments or in the community section of the channel. I'd genuinely love to see what you create and learn from your techniques as well. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.